Week 8 in the SEC is officially here. We're at the midway point of the SEC season, and we don't have a clear-cut winner of who could potentially be in the driver's seat for the SEC race. Texas A&M, are they the best team in the SEC? What does Ole Miss have to say about that? Who can rebound after a tough one last week? These are our Week 8 previews around the SEC. Hello, everyone. I'm Lucas Hill here of SEC Live at the Voice of College Football. Make sure you all do us a favor and hit the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Turn on the bell notifications so that you are notified every time we go live, post a new video, or post a new short here on SEC Live at the Voice of College Football. Got Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC joining us. Chris, always a pleasure to talk ball with you, man. How are you today?
Doing good. It's crazy to think we're like kind of, at this halfway point and look at the remaining games on the schedule. I'm like, oof. I mean, we're starting to get into the thick of a lot of good schedules, but it's also a little depressing to think, oh no, this is halfway over already. I don't like that.
It's funny because I was talking with somebody earlier and they were talking about how last year, man, we had a lot of 2007 vibes. We had a lot of upsets, craziness. And it feels like this year, I wouldn't say it's like 07, but it's more of this has been the last 2 years. It's been the year of the underdog. Part of that has to do with the rise of NIL. Part of that has to do with more of a more competitive landscape because of revenue sharing around college football. But I think that's what makes the game more fun at the end of the day.
It's a little bit more level playing field. You don't have elite dominant coaches that are just crushing everybody. And to me, I think that's better for the sport. Look at the NFL. You want more parity. You want more teams that could beat anybody on any given Sunday. You don't want, two teams going 15-1 and 16-0 in the NFL. You want teams that, every week can be beaten. And, there's no better way to put. I heard somebody put it this way earlier this week. They said, by standings, the best team in the SEC right now is Ole Miss. The worst team is Kentucky. And they played a few weeks ago, and that was a 7-point game. So that tells you right there, kind of top to bottom, how much parity there is in the SEC right now. Anybody can beat anybody on any given day. And as dire as things are at Florida and at Auburn and Arkansas right now, those teams could still, jump up and bite you. I mean, Florida beat Texas just 2 weeks ago. Auburn, as bad as it's going for Hugh Freeze, at least they've been very competitive in these last 3 games. They've been right there. So, and then Bobby Petrino gives Tennessee all they could handle last week in his first game as interim head coach at Arkansas. So I still think it's, we're starting to see some separation. We know A&M's good. We know Alabama's good. Still looks like Georgia's pretty good. But I think, again, to say those teams, can they be beaten? Yeah, Alabama's played with fire each of the last 3 weeks. They've won, which is the whole point of it. But yeah, it's just top to bottom right now. This thing is wide open. I think that's good for college football in a 12-team playoff. Look, Ohio State, when they finished the season, lost to Michigan, and took their second loss. Nobody was jumping up going, that's the national champion right there. Like, right. That's what makes this a lot of fun is you don't even have to win. As good as it is and fun as it is to go play for an SEC title and maybe hoist an SEC championship trophy. At the end of the day, that doesn't mean jack for winning the national championship anymore.
Chris, let's get into our Week 8 matchups. Let's start off the 11 a.m. kickoff out in Nashville. LSU Vandy. Vandy going into this one. If you were to tell me about 5 years ago at the state of where Vanderbilt was that they'd be favored against LSU, I'd have thought you'd have been crazy. But this is the new reality that we're in. Diego Pavia is playing just as many people expected him to in this Tim Beck offense. And people think, look, he's a great athlete, but I also think what makes Vanderbilt so good is that he works within Tim Beck's system. Having been in that system since New Mexico State, it revolves around him, and it revolves around getting his playmakers the football, spreading the field out, and playing time of possession, and pretty much playing almost a ground and pound type of game. LSU's offense, struggling to get off the ground. Defensively, best defense we've seen since the Dave Aranda area. What is going to be the big difference in this football game for both teams to pull out a win?
Yeah, I think more of the same for LSU's defense. I think they got to keep doing what they've been doing. They've been hands down one of the best defenses in the country this year. They don't allow you to score, and even last week against South Carolina, they give up a big 70-yard run to one of the running backs. They for the most part kept Lenore Sellers in check, and they didn't allow them to find the end zone. And so that's that's the most encouraging thing if you're LSU is keeping teams out of the end zone. And that was the hallmark of Alabama and Georgia for so many years when they had those great defenses. Now the offense is still super talented on paper for LSU. They just haven't put it all together. But the reason why you still have to buy LSU as a national championship contender is because there's that possibility that they do have that day where they put it all together on offense. I thought last week they moved the ball on South Carolina pretty well. They just had 3 red zone turnovers that cost them. Juwan Johnson fumbled at the 1-yard line as he's going in to score. And then Garrett Nussmeier threw 2 red zone interceptions that, were boneheaded mistakes on his part. But again, if he cuts those out, LSU would have won by 30 last week against South Carolina. So, and some people said, oh, you can't take those away. No, I get it. They only won by 10, but they could have that game. They're knocking on the door. If they have that breakout game on Saturday against Vanderbilt, I think, God, everybody's going to be hopping on them to beat A&M the next week in Baton Rouge. So, this is a big game for LSU. It's a big game for Vanderbilt, but I'll put it this way. Everybody in that Vanderbilt locker room and building thinks they came into the season thinking we can play for a national championship. Nobody on the outside thinks that. They thought Vanderbilt, great story last year. Let's see if they can repeat it. I mean, what was their over-under win total? I think this year was like 4.5 still. Like, people thought Vandy was going to come back down to earth. To their credit, Clark Lee's done a phenomenal job of coaching. But I think when you talk about expectations, put it this way. If Vanderbilt goes 8-4, they may throw a parade in Nashville and go, oh my God, what an incredible season. If LSU goes 8-4, we're talking about buyout for Brian Kelly, because that's not the LSU standard. So when I put that out there in like expectations, LSU must win this game. They have to win this game, because if they lose it, that means they have to run the table the rest of the way to make the playoff, most likely. And they're not going to do that. I mean, they got to play at Alabama. They got to play at Oklahoma to finish the season. So LSU, to me, this is a must-win for them. It's an 11 a.m. game. It's probably going to be sleepy. They're going to come out kind of sleepwalking and all this. But I do know a lot of LSU fans are making that trip. So, and Vanderbilt, I'm sorry to say it, their fans have come out to support the team a little bit more this year, but opposing fans still can take over that stadium. So I'd expect LSU is going to travel really well. Wouldn't shock me at all if they're going to have a loud contingent of fans there. But if they go out there and execute, don't turn the ball over, and the offense does what they're supposed to do, I think the defense is going to do enough to keep Diego Pavi in check. I don't think they'll shut him down like they did Lenore Sellers last week. But think about that LSU Vandy game last year. They had some early success, and then LSU kind of put him in a chokehold and just pulled away late. So I'd expect probably the same kind of, narrative for this one.
Let's say that Nussmeier has kind of a game that he had in the first half of last year, and even of what you saw over the course of this season, because I've heard it a lot from a lot of LSU media. Is it time to maybe not take him out of the game, but at least give Michael Van Buren a drive?
No, I think that ship has sailed. I think you had that chance a couple weeks ago when you were playing Southeastern and Garrett Nussmeier they admitted he was injured. I think now that he's come out of that, then they've said he's actually feeling as healthy as he has all year. Okay. So, and even Clark Lee said this week that, on the GPS tracker, when Nussmeier took off and ran, they clocked him at 20 miles per hour. So anything that's hampering him, I know he had an ankle injury last week, the torso on the throwing motion, all that. Everybody said the velocity on his throws, Jordan Rogers said the velocity on his throws looked fine. So it seems like Garrett Nussmeier is as healthy as he's going to be. And so I think that narrative's kind of out the window as far as Van Buren. And the fact that they played Nuss injured tells you how much they think of Van Buren. They think he's a nice backup, but not quite ready to throw into an important SEC game. So it's going to be the Nussmeier show. The key for LSU is keep trying to run the football. They've been bad at it to start the season. Caden Durham had some nice runs last week, a little bit more encouraging there. So I'd expect LSU to run the football a little bit better, because this offensive line is very green for LSU, but they seem to be getting better each week. And if they continue to mature and grow, I think LSU will run the football a little bit better here in the coming weeks.
I expect a heavy rotation between him and Harlem Berry. I think those are your two backs that you're going to rely on throughout the rest of this season. And I think those two should be getting at least per game 10, 15 touches on the field. I think that now that you're at this season, I think LSU limits the amount of touches that you're also getting from the rest of the running back room, and you're limited it to those two backs when it's all said and done.
Yeah,
On the Vanderbilt side,
people like to bring out the narrative. They're like, oh, LSU didn't run the football against Ole Miss. Like, yeah, Caden Durham was hurt. Like, nobody paid attention that their starting running back was out that game. Jawan Johnson did okay, but yeah, I think moving forward with Durham healthy, he's going to get some more confidence going and will run the football better.
On the Vanderbilt side of things, everybody knows about Diego Pavia, but you also can't forget about the rest of the core. You talk about Eli Stowers, who I think could end up being a top 10 tight end in this year's draft class, maybe even a top 5 guy. You talk about Cedric Alexander, who, in my opinion, hasn't really gotten enough attention as a running back in the SEC, knowing what he's been able to do with the football and knowing how effective that he has been. He's been able to break off a couple of big runs. You saw what he did a couple weeks ago against Alabama. Who do you think is the X factor, though, going into this football game for both sides?
Yeah, I mean, for Vanderbilt, if they can be balanced, I mean, look, Pavia gets all the headlines, but Cedric Alexander's a guy I like since he stepped foot on campus there at Vanderbilt. I think he's a really good running back. He's had some really nice moments this year. He's got over 300 yards rushing, 5 rushing touchdowns. So to me, I'm looking at Cedric Alexander. All the attention is going to be on Pavia. But if LSU is worried about, the passing game, worried about where Pavia is going, I think if they just turn around and hand the ball off to Cedric Alexander and he's getting a push and getting 4 or 5 yards a touch, I think they ride him and play ball control, keep the ball out of the offense of LSU. It's kind of what Ole Miss did a little bit. They had some long sustained drives where LSU's defense, bend but don't break that day. Ole Miss just capitalized. They got 2 good drives right before halftime and built up a double-digit lead and ended up being enough to beat LSU. So I'm wondering if Vandy's kind of looking at that saying, look, we don't need the big 87-yard play. We need those long, sustained 13 plays, 80 yards, those kind of long, sustained drives to eat up clock, keep the ball out of LSU's hands. And I think that's what they think is going to be their success. And Cedric Alexander can be a reason why they do that.
Vanderbilt top 50 in the country in time of possession. LSU 57th in the nation, both averaging just over 30 minutes of ball control in a game. Oklahoma going to Columbia. It's an early morning game for South Carolina, but I talked about this yesterday on my South Carolina show. This is probably going to be a must-win for South Carolina from here on out. I thought last week you had opportunities to win that football game. You were gifted opportunities. You forced 3 turnovers, but you couldn't do anything on offense. You got to the opposite side of the 50 16 times, I think, in the second half alone, and you only came away with 3 points. You can't have that going up against an Oklahoma defense, which, in my opinion, this is the best front four that South Carolina is going to play all year. I know a lot of people talked high about LSU's front four last week, but they don't have the amount of depth that Oklahoma has compared to. So if you're Shane Beamer and company, you just fired Lonnie Teasley this week. Sean Elliott's your new O-line coach. I don't expect night and day improvement from this South Carolina offensive line. But what are you looking to see, at least on the side of South Carolina's offense, that maybe you haven't seen much of this year?
Well, the offensive line stinks. They have no run game to speak of. If I'm Mike Shula, I got to somehow get Lenore Sellers out in space. So I don't know if you have some rollouts, some bootlegs, something to get him out in space to move around. And the problem is they don't have any pass catchers they can trust or rely on. Nick Harbor's just been okay. They really missed Josh Simon from a year ago. The piece they're missing the most is Rocket Sanders. I mean, talk about one of the most underrated pieces last year. He really helped that offense go and open it up. But if we're just talking realistic for South Carolina, like realistic expectations the rest of the way, to me, 6-6 should be the goal at this point. I know they came in with high hopes of playoffs. And look, if they could run the table, playoffs still possible, but I don't think they're going to run the table. I'd say 6-6. You're at 3 wins right now. I think they'll beat Coastal Carolina. I think they're going to have a great chance to beat Clemson the last week of the season because they're down. But that means you got to find me one more win. And of these, after this game against number 14 Oklahoma, it's number 6 Alabama, number 5 Ole Miss, and number 4 A&M. 3 top 10 teams. So this is your best chance at the hypothetical 6th win is against Oklahoma at home. So you're right. This is an important game, almost a must win for South Carolina. If they lose this one, they may lose the next 4. And you're talking about a 5-7, potential 5-7 finish. That's if you beat Clemson. Shane Beamer very much, I don't know if I say hot seat, but a lot of questions being asked around the program of, oh, is this where we're headed? We just had a generational quarterback. Like Norris Sellers is still being talked about going number 1 or, top 10 in the draft next year in the NFL draft. So you're going to tell me you just had a top 10 draft pick at quarterback and you went 5-7? That to me is very incriminating on the supporting cast. What did you do to add talent around him? And I said that all offseason. I was shocked they didn't go out in the portal and try to add some big time wide receiver help with some of that money, that NIL money. But you're right. Important game for South Carolina. An important game for Oklahoma. They got to bounce back from the loss to Texas, where John Mateer had his worst career game in college.
If I'm Oklahoma, I'm not playing John Mateer this week. He's not healthy. He rushed his surgery. He rushed to get back on the field. He wasn't ready to play last week. If you see him start to struggle early on in the game, I do expect for Ben Arbuckle to put Mike Hawkins Jr. in, because realistically, you want to preserve the health of your quarterback through the rest of the year, because now you're expected on a deep playoff run. You've had a lot of people commend you for the first 5 games of the season and seeing how John Mateer was playing. Man, he's playing like a Heisman contender, early favorite for the Heisman Trophy. He gets hurt, and you saw what happened last week. He rushed to get back onto the field, and he made mistakes. He didn't look comfortable in the pocket. Most of the throws that he made, horrible decision-making. And most of that was because he panicked. And going up against a South Carolina front 4 that's going to get after you. Chris, you mentioned Lenore Sellers and how he could potentially leave after this year. You haven't even mentioned what could happen if they go 5-7. You're going to see guys enter the portal, guys like J.R. Johnson that could be gone. You may see guys like Dylan Stewart that could be gone. A lot of money that you spent to retain these guys from last year, they could be hitting the portal because of the lack of success and the lack of a market that is in South Carolina. They're going to go someplace where they can go contend for a championship. They can go be developed at a higher rate and potentially go earn some more money along the way as well.
Yeah, and you're starting to see that now. A lot of guys that have played in 4 games this season go on that route, saying, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to opt out the rest of the season and preserve a red shirt and hit the portal and be somewhere else next year. Not South Carolina, but you're seeing that at a couple of schools. Texas had a couple guys do that. So, yeah, we're going to see. That's why I say it's such a big game for both sides. For Oklahoma, knowing what's ahead for them, the schedule is brutal. So that's where I say, like, this is an important game for both sides. This is an important game for Oklahoma to still have the playoff hopes that they do. They have to beat South Carolina. You can't take a second loss here. But for South Carolina's sake, you lose a 4th game here. Like I said, a lot of question marks around Shane Beamer's future, especially with all the tough games that are coming up. So, yeah, look, I think Mateer, I'm with you. I thought he shouldn't have played. Hindsight's always 20/20. He did not look healthy. They're saying he was healthy. He just wasn't there mentally, that he was making all the wrong mistakes. Okay, that's fine. Either way, he sucked. So I do think we're going to see a much better Mateer this week against South Carolina.
I want to see this running back room kind of for Oklahoma specifically. I want to see them mix it up with guys like Torrey Blaylock and Taylor Tatum. Get John Mateer on the run if he is to play. Or even if he isn't, Mike Hawkins Jr. can run too. He's saw a little bit of that against Kent State. You saw a little bit of that last year, and you saw Oklahoma have some success because of it. And Blaylock, in my opinion, is going to be one of your X factors. He's not really talked about a whole lot, and the guy averaging close to 5 yards a carry, can get out in space, make men miss. He's, in my opinion, more of your red zone back. And so when you get into that area, you better be looking out for number 6 when it's all said and done. I think Deion Burks, when it's all also is a guy that he's just been having one of those seasons that he's just gone so highly under the radar, and people will forget how highly sought after he was in the portal last year coming from Purdue. You saw what he did last year, even with a bad offense, and you see what he's doing with some consistency. He's finally getting the football more. Ben Arbuckle is utilizing him like he's done in past, which is getting your athletes the football, getting him on the reverses, pop passes, screens, quick outs. That's something that I want to see more from Oklahoma, more of that creativity. I do think you adjust your game plan for a guy like John Mateer because you're going to get him into 2 and 3 step dropbacks and you're going to get the football out of his hands quickly.
Yeah, and you mentioned Blaylock. He's been okay. Would like to see some more consistency there. But how about the big fat dud of the offseason? I mean, everybody thought Jaden Ott was going to be a home run signing, and he is, they say he's not been 100% healthy, but I mean, he had 1 carry for 2 yards against Texas. This was coming on the heels. He had 11 carries, a season high against Kent State, and everybody's going, "Oh, I think he's finally there. He's finally healthy." Nothing in the Texas game. So, Jay Knott's the one to keep an eye on. Like, does he ever get fully healthy? Do we ever see the guy that he was supposed to be, one of the top NIL signings of the offseason?
So this is what Ben Arbuckle said in his press conference. He says, Torrey has been consistent all year. It's not necessarily anything that Jaden Ott is doing wrong. It's what a lot of other guys are doing right. So maybe the injury bug has to be a factor in there, but
it's BS because nobody else is crushing it. So it's Ott's Ott's the most talented. If he's not playing, it is something Ott's doing personally. He's not playing well.
I think the injury bug is still bothering him as well. I mean, here's a guy that coming from Cal 2 years ago probably was going to be the number 1 back. I had him going as the number 1 back in 25 in the 24 preseason. Then he gets hurt, doesn't perform well, and then you see what he's doing now, and it just feels like he's just being underutilized. But biggest thing that I'm excited to see is Oklahoma's front 5 going up against this pass rush of South Carolina. Gave up 5 sacks last week to Texas. Going up against the South Carolina pass rush. They're not Texas, but they can still get after the quarterback. Guys like Brian Thomas, guys like Dylan Stewart. You got to improve in the interior. Guys like Nick Barrett has kind of showed out a little bit, but still going to be an interesting matchup out in Columbia. Texas A&M going to Arkansas. Bobby Petrino and company gave a little scare to Tennessee last week. Taylon Green had a couple turnovers, but I think overall didn't play bad. Could have done better, but I think the number one thing that Arkansas did was run the damn ball. 240 yards against this Tennessee front 7, and they kind of busted them in the mouth early on. What are you expecting to see from Texas A&M, whose run game is really damn good, and going up against a defense that, in my opinion, probably the most complete in college in the SEC?
Yeah, it's tough. Well, one, on A&M's defense, they've looked very good these last 3 weeks in an SEC competition. It's all been at home. Florida did go on 2 touchdown drives to start off the game, though, and then A&M's defense kind of woke up. Earlier in the year, though, they didn't look great. They were giving up points and yards to UTSA and Utah State, and then they went to Notre Dame and again needed a miracle to pull that one out and gave up 40 points and a ton of yards to Notre Dame. I look at this and say, this is going to be the first home game with Bobby Petrino back in Fayetteville as the interim head coach. That stadium is going to be electric. They're going to give him a standing ovation. A&M just lost Lavian Moss they're saying not the season, but he's going to miss significant time.
This is the second straight year he's going to miss time.
Ruben Owens has been really good. You can even argue he's been their best back. But go look at what happened to this team last year in the game they lost Lavian Moss in the South Carolina game. They went on to lose 4 of their last 5.
Right.
So I'm just saying, like, I think Owens can be fine. Amari Daniels is okay. But, like, if they can't run the ball as effectively, A&M, then the pressure's on Marcel Reed. Now, he's been very good. The additions of Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion have been fantastic. And the one caveat here is Arkansas's defense sucks. Like, they've been terrible. And could they have gotten one more stop last week against Tennessee? They might have pulled off the upset. So that speaks to how good the offense has been with Taylon Green, and Petrino still got the offense humming. So I almost look at this one as if Arkansas is going to pull off this upset, you're going to have to win a shootout, and you're going to need A&M to make a mistake. Now, Marcel Reed's made some mistakes. He threw a red zone interception last week. He's kind of done that here and there, made a boneheaded mistake once or twice. They're going to need him to do that. And here's the key. A&M's only left Kyle Field once this year, and that was the Notre Dame game, which, like I said, they needed a prayer and a miracle to pull out. The next 3 games are on the road for A&M. They're going. This is their first stretch of going on the road in SEC play. This is going to tell us a lot of who A&M really is. again, I just wish Arkansas's defense was a little bit better because I'd be picking them in this upset spot. I just, the other part too is Bobby Petrino, I want to say was 2-0 against A&M when he was head coach at Arkansas. So we'll, it was a long time ago, but still, we'll see if, we'll see how this one plays out. But I just feel like A&M's been playing a little bit above their head. And I feel like, okay, are they really this good? Maybe they're brought back down to earth. Maybe they don't lose this one. Maybe they pull this one out in ugly fashion. But the next couple weeks, A&M's got to go to LSU after this week, a place they have never won since they've been in the SEC. And then they have to play at Mizzou. So this could be a stretch of, A&M starts to string up some losses here and they come back down to earth.
I know they haven't played the best opponents, and I think they're still hanging on that Notre Dame win. But like you mentioned, the last couple weeks defensively, aside from a few games, they've been very dominant. I mean, you talk about guys like Cassius Howell, one of the best SEC edge rushers this year. You talk about Torian York, who's playing out of his mind at the linebacker position. My only thing that is concerning is, look, I'm still kind of sold on A&M. I do think the stench of Jimbo Fisher and Kevin Sumlin is starting to leave College Station, but it's still, part of it is still lurking there. Can the offense get consistent? Can Marcel Reed play a clean football game? Can they play a complete game? They can't play one half of football like you saw last week. You can't have that going forward. Like you mentioned, this is probably a majority of the SEC right now is about to go through their gauntlet stretch. When you go to Arkansas, you go to LSU, and you go to Missouri. Part of me, I'm still sold on A&M, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised if Arkansas finds a way to stay in it and find a way to at least cover against this team.
Let me give you one more note on A&M. They have had musical chairs at quarterback for years now. The last time they went from wire to wire in a season with a starting quarterback was the COVID year, 2020, with Kellen Mond. Obviously, Marcel Reed has to stay healthy, but if he doesn't, what happens to A&M? Does he get banged up? Does he miss a game or something like that? It just worries me because they've had a track record of this the last 5 years of either quarterbacks being benched or quarterbacks getting hurt and missing games. So again, if Marcel Reed is the guy, he's played great. He's played great overall. So if he could stay healthy and carry them, awesome. But I just look at what's happened the last 5 years at College Station. They haven't been able to do that. Everybody was all in on Connor Wegman last year, and then he gets hurt, and it turns out Marcel Reed was even better. So, we'll see how this one plays out. Again, if I'm putting money on, I think A&M wins. I've had even somebody at College Station tell me, I think we're good. I don't think we're top 4 in the country. But then again, you look around the league or look around college football and say, who is the best teams in college football? I mean, everybody's got their warts and their blemishes. So, but ultimately, if I had to put money on, I think A&M wins.
Don't be surprised if Arkansas manages. Are you expecting much from Taylor Green this weekend?
Yeah, you absolutely should. Like I said, look at what the last 3 weeks where A&M's defenses look better. Like I said, they've been at home. Their one game on the road, they gave up a ton of yards and points to Notre Dame. So let's see if that wrecking crew defense maybe isn't as wrecking on the road.
Ole Miss, Georgia. Here's one, probably game of the week in the SEC. This is a big one. Ole Miss pulled off the upset last year, but a different quarterback. Trinidad Chambliss is playing pretty well. Struggled a bit last week. Couldn't really get a lot going on the ground. I do expect, though, that Keywan Lacey is going to be the feature back going into this game. I do have a feeling that if you're talking about a game that, look, many people, they know about him, but I don't feel like there's a lot of people that are really paying attention to what Keywan Lacey has been doing for this Ole Miss program. You talk about, and because most of the focus has been on what Trinidad Chambliss has been able to do. Keywan Lacey's there too, averaging 5-6 yards a carry, going up against a Georgia front seven that obviously took a step back this year. Not the notable names that you're used to seeing on Kirby Smart's defense, but I feel like this is another game that probably could determine who could be headed out to Atlanta. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, this is the stretch of the schedule for Ole Miss that is the toughest. They have to go on the road to Georgia and on the road to Oklahoma. I picked preseason that they would lose both of these games, but look at the rest of their schedule. You know, here's what's crazy is they could lose these next two, and they're still going to be a favorite to make the playoff at 10-2. But let me just create a scenario. They go into the Egg Bowl. I believe it's at Mississippi State this year.
Yes.
What if they're 9-2 and they go into the Egg Bowl and Jeff Lebby pulls off the upset win and Lane goes 9-3 and face plants a second straight year, a year again where you thought Ole Miss is destined for the playoff, and they face plant again? Man, I mean, that'll be Lane may start looking more at these other jobs, Florida, Penn State, and go, I just will never get it done at Ole Miss. Like that, I said that last year. I said, with all the talent they have with Jackson Dart and Walter Nolan, all these stud pieces, I said, if he can't get it done that year, he ain't ever going to get it done.
Right.
Well, enter this year, they the schedule sets up well for them. Don't get me wrong. Their one true real test they've had was against LSU, and it was at home, and they pulled it out. Great. It was a monster win for them. But I'm still standing by. I think Ole Miss loses these next two, and I think the clock is going to strike midnight on Trinidad Chambliss. Great piece on him this week at CBS Sports. A great story. But there's still a Ferris State quarterback inside of there, and I think we're going to see that against this Georgia defense. I think Kirby's going to make him look like a Ferris State quarterback, and I think gets humbled. And here's the tough part. Ole Miss loses. Let's say they get blown out. Let's say they lose by 20, and it's not even close. What do you do if you're Lane Kiffin next week? Do you say we're going to stick with Trinidad because we're hearing all signs behind closed doors that Austin Simmons is healthy now?
Right.
Or do you go back to Austin Simmons, the guy who was at the Manning Passing Academy, the guy that you brought to SEC Media Days as one of your leaders? Like, how you just turn your back on that guy all of a sudden because, you got Wally pipped? It's that would be very interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out for Ole Miss. But again, it would shock me if Ole Miss went in there and beats Georgia for a second straight year. No, this defense is not looking like a typical Kirby Smart dominant defense of years past. Now, they did in the second half against Auburn last week. Well, let's face it, it's Auburn, and Hugh Freeze has got issues of his own right now. But I'm sticking with my prediction. I think Georgia wins because it's at home, and I think Ole Miss loses these next two games.
Let me give you an interesting stat, Chris. Ole Miss, 96th in the country in rush defense. Georgia's 40th. But struggled last week. 31 carries, 79 yards. Had averaged just 2.5 yards a carry. I feel like this is a game where Georgia has to get a guy like Chauncey Bowens involved. You gotta quit with the running back rotation at this point. You gotta find your featuring guy, and that's Chauncey Bowens. You've seen what he's done the last couple of weeks. I've seen him play at a very high level against an Alabama front four. I saw him have some great runs against Kentucky. I'm surprised he didn't get as many carries as we were expecting him to last week at Auburn. But I feel like this is a game where Mike Bobo starts to go back to your feature back, and that's going to be Chauncey Bowens.
Give me your stat again on what was Georgia or Ole Miss against the run?
96th.
Okay. Yeah, the other stat that just was glaring to me this week is strength of schedule. Ole Miss is 63, Georgia's 8. So to me, again, this is where I go back to some of these stats and everything is a little bit of fool's gold at this point in the season because we don't know who people really are yet. When you get to go out on the road and start to play tough road environments, particularly in the SEC, we start to find out who you are. Right. And this is where I think rubber meets the road. We get to find out, turns out Georgia's a pretty damn good program. Everybody wanted to bury them after the Bama loss. Turns out Kirby Smart didn't forget how to coach football. I think we see more dominant Georgia football this week because it's payback too. They owe Ole Miss for last year. So I think Georgia gets back to, you're right, ground and pound on the run game. I love Nate Frazier. I wish we saw more of him, but Bowen's been great. And yeah, I think Ole Miss kind of comes back down to earth.
Line opened up at 10.5 last week. Now it's down already to 7.5. I mean, what are you thinking around that line?
I think people are starting to put money on, they looked at Georgia, was almost down 17-0 at Auburn last week. I think people are just selling on Georgia right now. But I think, like I said, I think they're going to give you more reason in the next couple of weeks to buy back in on Georgia.
They have one call, and I think that goes back to people that they're about to go up 17-0, but people forget they had 32 minutes of game time to play in that Auburn game. So
Yeah.
that's something that you need to take into consideration. Mississippi State going to Gainesville, Florida. 9.5-point favorites going into this one. Struggled last week. Got off to a pretty good start going up against a good Texas A&M program. Only had 3 after that first quarter. DJ Lagway struggled with efficiency, man. I mean, you that's the one thing that I really got to say about him is he's really taken a big drop compared to what people expected him to do in the preseason. People were expecting him. Maybe he could be a Heisman finalist. Maybe he could do this. But I mean, you got to be real. This kid is only this is going to be his 11th start ever since he took over for last year. And realistically, I mean, this Florida program as a whole has so much talent. You talk about Dallas Wilson. You talk about so many dudes that Florida did a great job of hitting the portal and recruiting at a high level. The problem is that you just have not been consistent on offense. And that's essentially what is going to hurt you going into a season like this, where you know your head coach's job is on the line. You know that all likelihood, as much as Scott Strickland says, oh, we're sticking with Napier, I do feel like a change is going to be made at the end of this season. So going to play Mississippi State. Offense has taken a big step back over the last couple of games. What are you expecting from Florida recovering after tough loss last week to A&M?
Well, you said a change could be made at the end of the season. How about a change at the end of this weekend? I've been told by several people, if Florida loses this one to Mississippi State, they head into their bye week. Billy Napier will not be the head coach come Monday morning. So it's a matter of when, not if, for Napier at this point. Now, look, Florida has played better at home. Just 2 weeks ago, they pulled off the big upset win at home over Texas. But I look at the last week against A&M. They come out of the gates so strong with the scripted plays. They score 2 touchdowns early, and then suddenly A&M locked down Dallas Wilson, took him away, the big 5-star talent that jumped on the scene 2 weeks ago. But to me, the offensive line was terrible. Austin Barber had a Pro Football Focus grade of 0 this past week. Like, it was awful. Cassius Howell just ate him for lunch. They're going to have to play much, much better. Now, Mississippi State doesn't have the most dominant defensive line, so maybe this is a better matchup for Florida. I just know this. Jeff Lebby is knocking on the door. He's coming. Mississippi State is much improved this year. I said before the season they were going to win an SEC game or 2. It could be this one. It's going to be tough. It's going to be in the swamp, but wouldn't shock me. And if that happens, if Jeff Lebby and Mississippi State goes into the swamp and walks out with a win, Billy Napier will be sent to his office with a box and say, clear out. And that'll be the story of the weekend.
Do you think even if Mississippi State finds a way to stay in the ballgame, if it's a low score and they manage to cover, do you think he's out?
All depends on what the big money people are willing to do. Again, if you'd asked me a few days ago, is Penn State going to fire James Franklin? I would have said not yet, but they pulled the trigger. If the money's there, they will pull the trigger. And so, but this is, it's almost like Florida. They almost need to take the power out of Scott Strickland's hands because he's holding firm to Napier. He's like, that's my guy. But ultimately, the powers that be up top have to push forward. And here's the thing too: if Florida does win this game, okay, great. You're 3-4. Where are you going? I mean, the schedule's still brutal. I mean, you're playing for 6-6 in a Music City Bowl appearance. I don't know. Like, what are you really doing at that point? So to me, way more important game for Florida to try to figure it out. But Mississippi State, man, played with house money going into this one. They're 0-2 in the SEC. If they find a way to win this one, it is curtains for Napier.
This will be the 4th. If Florida is to lose and Napier is fired, it'll be the 4th straight year that a Florida head coach is fired in the middle of the season. Will Muschamp, Jim McElwain, Dan Mullen, and now it could be Billy Napier for the 4th straight year. And the ironic thing is, the previous 3 didn't make it past 3 seasons. Billy Napier got lucky and made it past his 4th. I really like Mississippi State's red zone defense, man. I mean, they've been able to buckle down. You saw what they did against Arizona State. You saw what they did early on against Texas A&M, forcing a turnover early on. they're a very frustrating team to go up against, especially when you get inside of the 20. Texas going to Kentucky, 12.5-point favorites for Texas. Good opportunity to build upon the momentum. Arch Manning last week, I thought did fine. I thought he worked within the offense. I think he finally started to make some plays that people have been expecting him to make most of the season. The option was perfect. Made some difficult throws, but I think he was smart with the football. That's the number one thing that Texas was making a big emphasis on this week. Kentucky just stinks. What are you expecting in this one?
Yeah, I said Arch was good, not great last week. But he's getting better. He's getting more confident. So that's encouraging to me. Mark Stoops has had, again, the defense has played decent at times. They had their chances against Georgia, and Georgia just kind of like they made Georgia work for it. Even that early touchdown drive for Georgia, like it took them like 11 plays or something. Like they made them work for it. The South Carolina game just got out of hand very quickly. I thought Carter Boley, all things considered, actually played a pretty decent game against Georgia. Led him to a touchdown drive late. I was hoping that confidence maybe carries over, but Texas's defense is still legit, and they showed that last week against Oklahoma. That's the strength of the team, and so it's going to be tough. If you told me Kentucky could score 21, I'll tell you, okay, they have a chance to be in this game, but I don't think they will. And maybe the defense keeps Texas down below 30, but I just don't think Kentucky has a chance. But it is a night game in Lexington, and we've seen at times Mark Stoops' defense get up, particularly in Georgia games. They at home they tend to play their best defensive performances there. So we're gonna see. We still have reservations about Texas, right? Like about saying, oh, they're back. Like they could still very much go lay an egg here on Saturday and find themselves in a fourth quarter shoving match. But again, they have an outside chance still to run the table and make the playoff. Texas does. So no margin for error. This is one they have to win.
Kentucky had just 45 yards rushing 2 weeks ago against Georgia, Texas, with the third-ranked rush defense in the nation. Two good backs that we've seen with Dante Dowdle and Seth McGowan, but this Kentucky offensive line is just bad. But I think I want to talk long term with this game. Is Mark Stoops gone after this year if they finish another year winless in the SEC, or do they potentially give him another year?
It's all about the buyout discussion. I know there was a rumor the other day that Virginia Tech could flirt with him. I think he wants out. I think he wants this to be over. The problem is the $38 million buyout is still way too much. So I think they're going to have to do, when you saw the news of, Sam Pittman, that he, in good faith, kind of renegotiated a buyout with him and like, all right, you guys can keep that money. Like, that's what it would take. It would take him negotiating with it. But I don't think, like, when he comes out and says, of course I'm motivated. Of course I want to be here. No, there was no talk of a buyout and all this. Like, I think he's sending the hard message. If you want me out of here, you're going to have to pay full dollar. So it's going to take some behind us. And this is where I get into like, where's the pride for Mark Stoops? Like, dude, we love you for what you did here. You're the winningest coach in Kentucky history, but we can also admit it's run its course, and these last couple of years have been terrible. But that's where I was, even like in the NBA when Greg Popovich is losing all his games the last few years, I'm like, dude, where's the pride for like your winner mentality? You're having these crappy seasons. Pull the ripcord. It's time to go. Like it's over here. And it just feels like Mark Stoops is trying to draw the line in the sand, going, no, pay me my money and I'll go. So we'll see how this plays out. Here's the thing. I just don't know how this season ends poorly for Kentucky, which it probably will. I don't know how you go into the offseason and go, all right, fans, get those season ticket, deposits in for next year. Who's excited about that? Right. Who's buying tickets again for 2026? It's over. This has run its course.
That's why majority of the money is about to go to basketball and baseball when it's all said and done. Let's go to Tennessee, going to Alabama, another massive one. Tennessee hasn't beaten Bama since 2003 at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Ty Simpson is playing out of his mind. He's just been so much better from that first game against Florida State. I think you're finally seeing what type of leader that he can be. There's a reason why he's high up in the Heisman rankings. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up hoisting the Heisman Trophy when it's all said and done. Tennessee's offense been electric as always. Defensively, though, especially in that secondary, taking a couple hits lately. I think Alabama finds a way to get the football out of Ty Simpson's hands quickly. Guys like Ryan Williams, I expect Jeremy Bernard, both of those guys, I expect big games out of them. Isaiah Horton may go under the radar a little bit. He's going to have a big game himself. What say you?
Here's how I compare this. You ever gone out with some friends, maybe a bachelor party, or you're in Vegas and the night's getting started and you're all excited and you're like, all right, round of shots. You're like, all right, let's do it. And then a little while later, another round, Vegas car bomb, let's go. And then, you go on another round, you're on another round. And by the time you get to about the fifth round of shots, you go, oh, man, I don't know if I can stomach this. This is tough. That's what I feel like Alabama's last couple weeks. You get up for number 5, Georgia. Yeah, we're going to go stick it to Kirby. You get the win. You come back home, Vanderbilt. Yeah, it's Diego Pavia. Revenge game from last year. We did it. Last week, on the road, top 15 Missouri. Yeah, we found a way to pull it out. You come back home, number 11 Missouri, number 11 Tennessee. It's like, God, you don't get a break here. At one point, there's going to be a point where Bama just doesn't, they fall flat. Like, and I think they're a good team, and I think give Kalen DeBoer credit. Like, he's dialed up all the right plays and everything, going for it ballsy last week on the fourth downs, going for it, scoring the touchdown. Like, they've done everything great. Ryan Grubb's been fantastic, but I just wonder, when is enough? And the way this Tennessee offense is humming right now with Joey Aguilar, what happens if you keep getting punched in the mouth? Is there a point where Ty Simpson throws a bad interception and you go, oh, there it is. They had the letdown. So, look, they have answered the bell. Bama's been outstanding. I give them so much credit after that letdown week 1. But to me, it's just a tough ask for me to say they're going to keep running the tape. They still got to play 2 more top 15 teams at LSU and Oklahoma before it's all said and done. So I feel like there's going to be a game where they fall flat, but I don't know. It's a rivalry game. They want to smoke those fans. Every fan in there is bringing a cigar in the stadium. I find it hard to believe that they would have a letdown in this one just because of what it means being the third Saturday in October. But Tennessee's offense is good enough to get into a shootout with Bama. And if Bama makes one mistake late, it could cost them.
This is interesting. And I'm glad that you brought up the point about the round of shots analogy. I like that one. But you're right. I mean, you talk about the stretch that Alabama's had, and it just doesn't stop. And you talked about how they could run into a brick wall that Tennessee has. I think Tennessee manages to keep it close. I don't expect an upset, but I do expect Bama to continue to show some of their scars. I mean, defensively, you've still struggled in your run defense. You've given up a lot of yards the last couple of weeks.
Somebody brought this up that Vanderbilt was running the ball on them.
Yes.
Vanderbilt stopped running. Cedric Alexander, they stopped running. Last week, Ahmad Hardy was moving the ball in Bama. They stopped running. They kept throwing the football. So guess what Josh Heupel's not going to do? He's not going to stop running.
Right.
Deshaun Bishop, whoever it is back, they're going to keep running. So that's where I say, like, Bama's defense has been good, not great. But to your point, they've shown you can run the football on them. It just seems like these last couple of weeks, teams have just stopped running. Like, why'd you stop running? It was working.
And I think that's part of that is because of getting down early and having to play kind of panic mode. But I think if you're Josh Heupel, you're looking at this and you're saying, man, we got an opportunity to really just expose something that Alabama's really been struggling with, something that you haven't really been consistent with, something that we're not used to seeing Bama do, which is struggle and run D. This is an opportunity for them to get your star backs and Star Thomas and Deshaun Bishop, both of which been pretty good running the football, both of them averaging between 60, 70, 80 yards a game. Both of those guys, I think, could be very effective when it's all said and done. I know it's a big ask to have to replace God dog, it wasn't. But anyway, it's a big ask to have to be a red zone back when it is all said and done, kind of do what you saw from last year. But I don't expect for them to be basically carrying the rock like you saw a lot of what Tennessee did last year. You're going to see a lot more of a balanced attack with Joey Aguilar. That's the one thing.
Dylan Sampson was the guy for them last year.
Sampson, thank you. Dadgummit, I played against Dylan Sampson in high school, and I didn't remember his freaking name. But, I mean, when you talk about what those two bring, they're not having it. They don't have to be Dylan Sampson. They're much more electric out the backfield. You can utilize them as athletes. I think I've seen Deshaun Bishop a little bit too line up in the slot a couple times this season. So I'm excited. I'm expecting to see that get creative with the play calling. I think you're going to be able to expose a little bit of what the secondary has kind of struggled with as well.
The key is to watch those injury reports coming out tonight, because Deshaun Bishop left the game last week getting banged up, and Jam Miller at Alabama banged up. So those are going to be key on the health of those running backs.
Missouri 1.5-point favorites going to the Plains to play Auburn. Auburn playing for their lives at this point. Offensively, they stink. Defensively, probably one of the best in the SEC. Was able to limit Georgia a good bit last year for the majority before they had collapsed in the second half. Offensively, you got to be able to move the football down the field, but I think you still struggle with this going with Missouri coming to play. I think Missouri learns their lesson from what they did last week. I think they, like you mentioned already, Chris, they continue to run the football with Bo Pribula and Ahmad Hardy, and even Jaden Roberts as well.
Yeah, I'm out on Auburn. I've been giving them the benefit of the doubt. I think their defense has been great. DJ Durkin's been phenomenal. Offense just stinks. Jackson Arnold, I think they preach to him, do not throw the ball into danger territory. Don't throw an interception. Great. You haven't thrown an interception. Awesome, Jackson. You know what you also haven't really done? Throwing touchdowns, because you got to take those chances. And Auburn just has no offensive identity. They can't run the football great. Damari Alston up and quits the team. Granted, I don't blame him. Wants to preserve his red shirt and play somewhere else next year. More power to him. But I just don't think it's going to happen for Auburn. I give credit to their fans. They showed up and showed out. It's going to be a night game at Jordan-Hare. They're going to be loud. Swag Surfer's going to be playing. All that's awesome. But last I checked, the stadium doesn't win football games. They can't score touchdowns. The offense has to score touchdowns. And so, I think it's a bounce back game for Mizzou. I think Ahmad Hardy runs all over Auburn, and I think Mizzou gets a big road night win on the Plains of Auburn. And again, just like Billy Napier of Florida, we could be talking about Hugh Freeze no longer the coach at Auburn come Monday morning.
I've had a lot of guys that I know talk in support of a guy like Damari Alston, who pretty much was a leader on that team. I know he didn't get a whole lot of carries and was not really the feature back when it's all said and done, but I think it goes back to what the culture is at Auburn at this point. Hugh Freeze said in his press conference that, he didn't meet up to expectations. Well, you talk about guys that spoke in support of him. A lot of people went out on Instagram, posted their support about him. One of the least selfish and loyal people I met at Auburn is what Champ Anthony said about him. You had, I don't know how familiar you are with Philip Dukes, who used to be at On 3 and now is has his own thing. Said he had great grades, great attitude, but I think he's right. The culture there that Hugh Freeze has built is just bad. There's almost no culture there because of how far this program has fallen ever since he took over.
Yeah, it's again, it's tough. It sucks because me and a lot of people said when Auburn hired Hugh Freeze, I said it's a home run hire. Like, I just thought this is great. A lot of people wanted Cadillac Williams to get a chance, and that would have been a fun story. But ultimately, it was about winning. We want to get back to winning, and Hugh Freeze is a winner. Everywhere he's been a winner. And the one thing he's done is he's had great quarterback play. Look at what he got out of Bo Wallace and Chad Kelly, and look at what he had with Malik Willis at Liberty and all this. And yet he's come to Auburn and he's given you 2 years of Peyton Thorne and half a year of Jackson Arnold, and it has been some of the worst, atrocious quarterback play we've seen in the SEC. So maybe the game's passed him by. I think he honestly should have passed over play calling duties in the offseason. He didn't do that, and thus this is where we are. So again, nobody to blame but himself. Hugh Freeze, he's recruited great, but all the talent in the world, but all that talent is going to go out into the portal because you can't find consistent quarterback play and an identity of an offense. Maybe they do on Saturday night. Maybe a miracle lands and they score 30 points. Jackson Arnold looks like a Heisman contender. Great. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, neither do I at this point in time. I mean, when you talk about how, in my opinion, Auburn kind of got lazy when it came to the portal and trying to go find a good quarterback, and you pretty much settled for what you have right now. And that's nobody else's fault but your own. But Gordy of Locked On SEC joining us. Always a pleasure talking some ball with him. Want to thank you to our good friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Going over to underdogfantasy.com or download the Underdog Fantasy app on your Apple or Android device and use our promo code VOCFBSEC. And when you play your first $5 lineup, you will get $50 instantly in free bets. Must be 21 or older, not available in all states. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. That is 1-800-GAMBLER. Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC, always a pleasure to talk some SEC football with him. Y'all go holler at him at Chris Gordy. He's on Sports Talk 790 if you're in the Texas area, and always across all platforms on the Locked On SEC network. Chris, thank you again, my friend. Have a great rest of the week. We'll catch each other soon.
Awesome, man. Thanks.